بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. How's it going?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah, it's been a long time. It's good to see you,
It's
brother.
been it's been too long. We talk often enough, but we don't do this often enough. So honored to share this space with you once again. Alhamdulillah. How you feeling,
Uh,
Shaykh?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. My pleasure and privilege. I'm glad that we were able to schedule this today.
Yeah,
Inshallah, we'll try to be more regular about this.
inshallah, inshallah. You and I, we've been talking a little bit over the past few weeks about just Black History Month as a whole. And before I get to some of the things I want to just sort of like bounce off of you and just engage in this dialogue, and I'd love to hear your most unfiltered thoughts on just hearing a concept like a Black History Month out loud.
Okay. Well, I mean, the whole topic is the whole topic of race in America is radioactive, and to talk about race in America is like trying to do it's like trying to perform brain surgery while wearing a hazmat suit, and the patient is on LSD and doesn't know that they need brain surgery, and thinks you're a monster, thinks you're attacking them. It's a very difficult topic to talk about, and I don't think that that's necessarily accidental. I think that they try to make this a very difficult topic to talk about. Um, but the issue of Black History Month, subhanAllah. Well, look, put it in the context of history overall. Uh, in terms of the history of the people who decided that you get to have 1 month to talk about Black history, the history of the people who decided that month, the month that will be dedicated to so-called Black history, will be the shortest month of the year. So talk about the history of this people, and you're talking about a history that is full of atrocities, that's full of criminal viciousness, and the character, the psyche, and the ethos of a people is comprised of their history. Their history gives birth to or forms their psyche, their ethos, and their character. But when you're talking about America specifically, but if you're talking about America and the West generally, they have a very serious, what in psychology would be a split personality disorder, in that their ethos is completely different from their character and their psyche. Mm. Their character and their psyche is the product of their history, but their ethos is not the product of their history directly. In other words, what I mean is their psyche and their character is genuinely the product of the atrocities that they've committed. It's genuinely the product of the criminal viciousness and brutality that they have inflicted on others, including each other. This actually exists in their psyche. This is a reality. The actual reality of their history does exist in their psyche and exists in their character, but the ethos that they have built has been built precisely for the purpose of denying that history. The ethos that they have built has been built precisely to cover up their deeds, to cover up and to hide their actions, and to deny their actions. So this has created a very fractured national psyche, a very fractured national identity, say, because the totality of your identity is like your character, your psyche, your ethos, and so forth, all of which is supposed to be congruent with your history. With other nations, their history is made of their deeds, it's made of their actions, what they learned from it, how they developed from that, how they were affected by that, and what kind of people they became as a result of all of that. That's for other nations. for the West, and especially for America, everything that made them who they are is denied.
Mm.
Therefore, also who they are, they deny. And one of the major factors of all of this, of course, is race. Specifically, well, not even race, but racism, white supremacy, and the dehumanization of so-called Black people, the dehumanization of Africans, and their treatment of them. This is all denied. And the worst thing you can do, if you're talking about it on an individual level, if you anthropomorphize the nation, as I'm doing, the worst thing you can do to someone who has a split personality is to confront them about their condition, because they've built their whole way of coping in the world, their whole way of functioning in the world is based on these two elements of their identity never meeting, never being reconciled, always being compartmentalized. And what needs to happen is for it to be confronted. It needs to be reconciled. It needs to be dealt with. They're never willing to do that. So you look at this reality of who they are, what they've done, and how they have built their the psyche that they have, and then the ethos that they desperately need to maintain. Put all of that as the context for Black History Month, which is your obligation in Black History Month, because this is an obligation that is being put on Black people in America. This isn't an opportunity. This isn't a celebration. This is an obligation being put on Black people, that you will agree to contain the totality of your history in 28 days in February. And what you will talk about during those 28 days in February is not going to make us too uncomfortable. Your obligation is that you will go along with the maintenance of our fake ethos, which requires you to be very, very careful about what you say about our deeds and our actions and what actually our psyche is. And this is a manifestation of that psyche, of that dominating psyche, of that oppressive psyche that has built the whole, this dominating and oppressive psyche that the ethos that they built is designed to deny and to pretend is not the case. The ethos that they built, of course, is not as oppressors, but as liberators, not as enslavers, but as saviors, as redeemers, not as punishers. The ethos that they built is the complete opposite of what their history shows they are and what they've been. And obviously you can never change, you can never become even the aspirational ethos, because that's all you can call it. The American ethos is an aspirational ethos at best. That's giving them benefit of the doubt that they aspire to be liberators, they aspire to be redeemers, they aspire to be saviors, they aspire to be good and righteous and freedom loving and fighters for justice and so forth, defenders of rights and all of that. We can, benefit of the doubt, say that they aspire to be that. But when you are applying it to yourself as if you are that, and as if there's any evidence whatsoever that you are that, then you'll never be it. So even if it is an aspiration, if you're claiming that you have already achieved it, well, then you never will achieve it. But they put Black History Month, a parentheses in the year when the totality of the African American experience has to be contained within this 28 days, and it has to be palatable. And the whole purpose of it is actually to celebrate us for giving you Black History Month.
It's disgusting.
You know, and the same goes for all of these, in my opinion anyway, my unqualified opinion, the federal holidays, like they just gave it to Juneteenth, I think last year or the year before.
Within the past few years, it's become a federal holiday. Yeah.
Federal holiday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day, and so on. To me, this is absolutely from again my opinion. This is absolutely grotesque. The federal government granting these holidays or establishing these holidays to me is like the killer coming to the funeral of the one whom he killed and giving flowers to the widow.
No.
That's what these holidays represent to me, in my opinion.
Mm.
And I'm always reminded when Black History Month comes along, or when there's Juneteenth, or when it's Martin Luther King Day, or what have you. I'm always reminded of that scene in 12 Years a Slave, where the slave master, the Michael Fassbender character,
Mm-hmm.
arbitrarily in the middle of the night, drunk, decides to wake up all the slaves and bring them into the mansion, bring them into the plantation house, and have them dance. And they know that what's expected of them is to pretend to be happy, to celebrate, to dance as the master requires, so that he can feel that he's a very magnanimous, very generous, very beneficent master. And how dare they not have fun? How dare they not show their absolute rapture at the great generosity of their great white master? And it's the most, in my opinion, it's the most grotesque form of oppression, where you're forcing someone not only to do something for your pleasure, for your enjoyment, and to make you feel good about yourself as an oppressor, but you also require them to smile while they're doing it. You require them to pretend to be happy and to pretend to enjoy it, and it makes an absolute mockery of all human emotion. To me, it's quite vicious, and I think that again, with regards to Black History Month, I think that it's important to see it in the overall context of the history of American society and Western civilization overall, and also to see it as what it is, which is the white power structure in America obliging Black people in America with regards to what they can and cannot celebrate about their history, what they can and cannot commemorate about their history. And in fact, also, that's an important word that I just said, celebrate, rather than mourn, rather than lament, rather than blame, rather than accuse, rather than seek justice. Celebrate your history. Don't bring the party down by reminding everyone about how terrible everything has actually been in this country for you, and how bad, how terrible this country has been to you. Celebrate your history. Be proud, because if you're not, then you're doing a disservice to other African Americans. You're doing a disservice to Black people. If you don't, this is our only opportunity. We've only got these 28 days to talk about how great Harriet Tubman was, to talk about how great Frederick Douglass was. We've only got these 28 days to talk about inventions that were invented, innovated by Black people, and so on.
George Washington Carver, Peanuts, all that good stuff.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Let's talk in these 28 days. This is the only 28 days we've got. Let's try to stick in as many Black achievers as possible, and not talk about the fact that just surviving in and of itself is an achievement. And let's talk about why that is.
Yes, and
That's my opinion, unfiltered.
Juzita kula khairan. May Allah reward you for your honesty, because honestly, I have really struggled to have this conversation with anyone, and that's why I've appreciated our back and forth even before getting on this video call, because how do you even begin to break this down? How do you even begin to digest a psychopath trying to cure their psychopathy with more psychopathic behavior? How do you deal with a barbarian trying to cure their barbarity with more barbarity, like a serial killer who goes to the funeral of all of their victims and hands them flowers and says, well, you should really be grateful that I showed up. This is a really nice setup you all have here for the funeral. I donated some. You're the reason that we have the funeral in the first place. It's insane. When we try to even quantify and describe blacks in America, what we're talking about is dehumanization, delineation by the destruction of lineage, and disestablishmentarianism predicated upon racially implemented rules of law. I mean, where do you even begin? where do you even start? Because people try to, or it's a Western thought that racism exists everywhere. Oh, even Muslims are racist. I met some Desis, I met some Arabs, and they're the most racist. Wallahi, thumma billahi, thumma tallahi. No one has ever outpaced the West in our known world, in our known history, in the extent of their dehumanization based on color coding humanity under the pretense of racial superiority. No one has ever done it in such a skewed and disgusting way, by using race as the methodology for not understanding but misunderstanding the nature of people. It is a perpetuated form of thought unique to the West. You read what Immanuel Kant, one of the great Western thinkers, what he said about Black people. You all under these false eugenics, all under these false pretenses of knowledge. And even, you don't have to go that far back. It's not like these things are secrets, right? You quoted, or you mentioned a scene from 12 Years a Slave, which I've only ever seen scenes from that movie. My father, may Allah give him hidayah, Allahumma ameen. He raised me as a reader. And in Black History Month in particular, he exposed me to a great deal of our history. And I remember as a child seeing these things and just thinking to myself, like, I can't believe this is a world that I'm living in, and that we just have to sort of ignore this this deeply encoded form of racism that exists at every single level of the society. And that's not, that's not claiming victimhood. This is not what Black Lives Matter got hijacked and distorted and turned into. This is a reality that exists within the society. And it's a dark thing, just like how Thanksgiving is also the national day of mourning for Native Americans, shrinking Black history in the United States down to, mashallah, there's 2 Black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. Mashallah, Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance really sent a message to power. Like, if these are our achievements, then the book that was written in 1850, How to Make the Ideal Slave, 13 years before the Emancipation Proclamation and 15 years before so-called Juneteenth, which I guess maybe at some point we can unpack that a little bit, but it had these 5 tenets, right? Maintain strict discipline and unconditional submission over slaves, create a sense of personal inferiority so that Blacks know their places. This is what it says. Instill fear in the minds of slaves, teach slaves to take interest in the master's enterprise, and ensure the slave is undereducated, helpless, and dependent by depriving access to education and recreation. Once upon a time, yes, it was just my people for about 450 years, from historically 1619 to 1865. But we can see that history has not stopped being written. When you look at the state of African Americans in the United States, you got to ask yourself, do you think that Martin Luther King, do you think that Malcolm X, people who were hosed and bit by dogs and imprisoned and beaten and lynched, do you think that they would be celebrating Black History Month? Would they count this as a dub? Like, would we consider this to be a win? When I really start to think about it, like you said, it's really just sick at its core, and just being completely unfiltered about it. I think it's a shame when, whether you are a non-Muslim who has a good heart and sees the value in treating human beings as equal, or you are a Muslim and you know that it is a fundamental tenet in our religion that unsuriya and hizbiya and asabiya, like these forms of nationalism and racism and xenophobia and so on and so forth, has no place in faith, right? Whether you are on either side of that spectrum, addressing the issue of the barbaric and psychopathic racism indigenous to and perpetuated in a crazy way by the West is not going to be cured by taking the same means that they take to address race in the West. It's like people who think that if you are sick, then all you have to do is just get sick with something. I don't know. How do you even describe the sickness of that? But I wanted to sort of pick your brain on when you hear about things like a Martin Luther King Day, or you hear about things like a Juneteenth, or how Malcolm X and really other figures from Black history in the United States have sort of been scrubbed from the history books. And as you also noted, like we use this 28-day window to sort of commemorate the palatable aspects of the history that we prefer. When you hear about something like this, and then you see the sort of state of the West and its racial issues, how do you even begin to sort of describe that to people who are in it but don't necessarily see it? Like, what does lifting the veil look like for somebody who doesn't see the problem?
That's a very good question. How to lift the veil for someone who doesn't see the problem?
Mashallah, you got a month. You got a month, and you get off for Martin Luther King Day. And honestly, like, I think the cure to the race problem is just stop talking about race.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? This is why I began by talking about you have to put all of this in the context of the split personality disorder that the West has and that America has. To understand that, like, for example, what you're talking about, like a Martin Luther King Day or Juneteenth or Black History Month, and then the way that those holidays are, or rather, what sort of activities, what sort of commemorations are designated for those holidays. You're always told that this is empowering. And so we have to talk about, again, Black achievement, outstanding African Americans, success stories, and so forth, and heroes, and so on, because it's empowering and it's positive, and what the idea is that what Black people need, what African Americans need, what everybody needs is positivity. So let's not focus on the negative and what have you. But it's inescapable. The very fact that you have sandwiched this topic in, again, the shortest month of the year, it demonstrates the extent to which this population remains contained, remains suppressed, remains repressed, remains marginalized, remains sidelined. And then, like I said, this is why it reminds me of that scene in the film. If you haven't seen the film, there's a scene where the slave master just, I can't remember what prompted him, or if anything prompted him. He just got drunk and decided to go into the slave quarters, and he wakes everyone up arbitrarily and forces them all to come into his mansion and do a dance and pretend that we're all celebrating together or what have you. And don't you dare be negative. This is your opportunity to be positive. This is, don't bring down the mood. Just put on that party hat and eat some cake, and don't bring everybody down by talking about how terrible it is that you've got 28 days to talk about this. That's what these things mean. And how to make someone understand that, I don't really. Well, it would depend, I suppose, on whether you're talking about trying to make an African American understand that or a white person understand that in America. But the point of all of these types of activities, the point of all of these types of holidays, all of these events, as with everything else in that society, the point of it is to maintain the compartmentalization of this split personality. To never bring these two elements of the personality, or these two elements of the identity, into what should be reconciliation, but would be conflict and confrontation, which would cause a complete meltdown.
Yeah,
if they actually have to confront that their ethos, as I said, their ethos is a completely fabricated illusion that does not that only is connected to their history insofar as it exists to deny their history.
mm,
It only
mm,
exists to cover up their history.
mm,
Uh, and so, Black History Month, Martin Luther King Day, uh, the scrubbing from history of Malcolm X, and many, many, many others. All of this is for the same purpose. It's to maintain the separation, the compartmentalization of the reality of what America is and what America was and who they are as a nation collectively. Obviously, I leave room for there to be individuals who somehow are able to save themselves from this radiation that has poisoned the entire society, black and white.
mhm,
Uh, but as a collective, as a nation, uh, the sickness is there, and you have to keep this separate because the reality of who they are and what they've done and who they are as a nation is completely unrelated to the ethos that they have created for themselves.
mm,
It's
mm,
completely unrelated. They're strangers one from the other. The ethos that they've created, the character that they have invented, doesn't exist. It's a fiction. The American character is a fiction. It's a fictional character because
mm,
the reality of who America has been is one of the worst villains in human history. And the character that they've created is a hero.
mm, mm,
And so everything that they do, like a Black History Month or Martin Luther King Day or so on and so on, uh, the reason that is established, the reason that it is given, and the way it is managed is for this purpose,
mm,
to keep the ethos safe from the reality, to keep the fiction safe from the truth,
mm.
to never let the two meet, because if they meet, it would be a catastrophe. It'd be a psychological meltdown of the entire nation.
When you characterize it as a split personality, and then you think about how tokenization is a tool of the West for minimization, tokenize blacks by giving them a month. Then in March is Women's History Month, right? And then you have Cinco de Mayo in May. Same country that has hypersexualized women and dehumanized femininity and turned it into a cash cow to the detriment of humanity. Or Cinco de Mayo, Hispanic Heritage Month, which is from September to October, while also the president of the country perpetuating a culture that demonizes and degrades Hispanics and the way that they prop up the country in the so-called modern era, right? It's just such a continuation of, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described it, it's jahiliyyah. So when I hear this and I sort of, through Tawheed colored glasses, look at this, I can't help but think about how, first of all, at its fundamental core, this diminishing the nature of a person because of the nature of their creation is satanic. At its fundamental core, it is a satanic notion, as Allah tells us in the Quran, that when Shaitan, the devil himself, saw the creation of Adam, the first human being, he looked at his creation and he looked down on it. And when asked why he disobeyed the command of Allah with regards to Adam, he said, Ana khayrun minhu. I'm better than him. I'm better than him. And he didn't note his intellect. He didn't note anything else. He noted the difference in their creation. You made me from the edge of a smokeless flame, and you made him from dirt. How I'm built and how he's built is different, which is why the test of Shaitan to acknowledge Adam was where he failed, because of this internalized perception of greatness. So anyone who is looking at anyone within the creation with that same type of mindset is intrinsically adopting a satanic worldview. And who has pushed satanic worldviews better than the West? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there will be people who have that jahiliyyah, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that ignorance, as the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, described it. In the situation with Abu Dhar and Bilal, and he called him the son of a black woman, you know. The Prophet ﷺ told Abu Dhar, you still have some of that jahiliyyah, some of that un-Islamic ignorance inside of you, that the knowledge of your creator and the knowledge of the purpose of life and the knowledge of the reality of the afterlife, of what happens when you die, is supposed to clean that out, you know. But because of, as you also described it, because of the toxic radiation of Western colonization with regards to racism, it's like everyone sort of feels the shame that the pioneers of this thought process are supposed to have, but they don't have. So it's like you'll find du'at, you'll find people in dawah, like they want to acknowledge Black History Month, or you'll find African Americans, they want to make the most of Juneteenth, or you'll find allies in humanity who want to say Martin Luther King Day, if not for these efforts of these people during the civil rights movement, none of us would have the world that we live in today. They want to, but it almost sort of reinforces that we're taking on guilt that belongs to someone else. Kind of like whenever you describe, in some of the videos about like Israel and things like this, like when you point all of this at a single group of people, you put it on the Jews and stuff, it's like you're taking the responsibility off of the West, who is really the hand behind the evil. And so, you know, you meet some, and I'm just speaking from a position of being a Muslim or a revert who meets Muslims. You know, I give the adhan and someone wants to come and be like, oh, mashallah, like Bilal. It's like, yeah, okay, I see what you did there. But that tokenism of blackness, I see what you're doing there. But Bilal, radiallahu anhu, was not just the black guy with the nice voice for the adhan. And we don't have to do to the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, what the West does when they tokenize a LeBron James, or when they tokenize, oh, you know, but that's a good black man right there. That's a good black guy. You know, that's a good slave. Like, we don't have to do that. We don't have to wait for two black quarterbacks to be in the Super Bowl, or Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl performance with all these black performers making up the flag. Or we don't need that to feel elevated, because the fact that our creator created us is a testament to what Allah tells us in Surah Isra, the 17th chapter of the Quran. Allah has honored the children of Adam. Allah has honored the children of Adam. And the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, in his khutbatul wida', in his final sermon, his farewell sermon to all the Muslims, he made it clear to us skin color is not what makes people superior. Allah tells us in the Quran, "Inna ja'alnakum ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu." Allah tells us He created us, male and female, from different tribes and different nations, just to come together and get to know one another. The 49th chapter of the Quran. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The one who is the most noble, the most honorable, the akram or akrama, is whoever has the most awareness of God's limits and lives by that. Whoever is muttaqi, whoever is a person of taqwa. And Allah knows this about us. And Allah alimun khabir. Allah is the most knowing and aware of this within us. But whenever the substance of a person has been reduced because of the nature of their skin, like, well, how depraved do you have to be to think that this is actually a thing? And so sometimes even, I mean, especially almost exclusively within the United States, you come across these things like, you know, black people are poor because they don't work hard enough. And some people who adopt that colonized mindset that if it isn't white, it isn't right, that fair and lovely culture, they adopt this mindset too. Yeah, black people in America are this way because, you know, they just don't work hard enough. Well, the truth is, that for 400 years, they weren't allowed any semblance of any type of education. And if they were caught reading, they would have their tongues cut out. And that's not an embellishment of history. This is a fact. And so when you see that 28% of Black Americans, Black men, have a higher chance of becoming felons, or they're 2 times more likely or 6 times more likely than white people to find themselves a victim of the prison industrial complex, it's a little bit more than just Black people are thugs and criminals and, you know, just all gangsters. It's a little bit more than not working hard enough. Now we're talking about something systemic. How is it that for my entire life, Black people have been 13% of the American population? I guess the number doesn't go up. We've been we'll be a minority forever. We just 13% forever. It's like people who say there's 1.8 billion Muslims on the face of the planet. I've been Muslim for 12 years. The number's never gone up, you know? But whatever. We'll do a census at some point. But how is it that 13% of the population being Black people also make up half of the homeless population? or this idea that blacks are uneducated or financially irresponsible when the economic opportunities are just not the same. It's come out after this Super Bowl performance, and we're not saying watch it, but you've probably seen some commentary somewhere somehow about this, but that there's an image of black people making up with their bodies the American flag, and because of that, this sort of iconography, this image that gets created and now becomes a part of the social zeitgeist. It's been estimated that black people during the slave trade generated almost $100 trillion worth of capital in modern times, accounting for inflation. Odds like that aren't odds that you can kind of just overcome, especially when your culture is sort of being exploited and exported for capitalism, for money, whether it's social influence through black music or black fashion or black language or black art, or it's just through the social oppression that black people inevitably have to endure. I think that it's almost, despite the force of black culture in the West, there's this sort of reinforced racial discrimination against blacks in the West. But I mean, I don't want this to become a conversation of just like, oh, black people, it's really hard for them in the United States. I like how whenever you and I discuss this, it goes back to some of those more deeper problems of Western thought. So if you just yourself had to think out loud, like on a systemic level or on a social level, whether it's at the highest level of Western governance, or even if it's just within Western people in their discourse and their thought process, what would you say are some of the features within the West that makes people buy into this sort of like this sort of depraved way of thinking, this sort of like psychopathic form of just racism? If you had to like highlight a few points.
Well, I've talked about it in the Quranic psychological decolonization, where I had a few videos, and some excerpts of those videos were taken and put on the channel as well. Excuse me, where I was talking about sort of the history of Western society, Western so-called civilization. I mean, very early history, almost primordial history, where when they were in the wilderness of Europe, in the mud, in the dirt, in the cold, in the snow, in the forest, and you're coping with bears and wolves and whatnot, and non-arable land, they had a very harsh environment. Europeans came up in a very harsh environment, and it was you can say dog eat dog. It was a dog eat dog environment that they came up in, and that made them very it's probably fair to say nihilistic, nihilistically materialist, in that the ultimate value is having resources. That's the ultimate, most important thing. Everything else is extra. And you see this even when they come up with that, what do they call the Maslow hierarchy? The Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
That basically, which a translation of that, I mean, it all sounds very good, as everything that they say always sounds good until you sort of, like an onion, peel it and find out it peels so many times that there's nothing left of it. Once you peel everything away, there's nothing left. The Maslow's hierarchy is basically that morality is a luxury. Is what is the bottom line of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is that first you have to have all of your basic needs met, and so on and so on and so on, and then once you're perfectly comfortable and fine, then you can prioritize morality and principles and values and so forth. And again, as always, they apply this as if it's universal. Well, no, this is distinct of you people. This is distinct of your society and your so-called civilization, your history. There are people who have nothing, and the last thing they would do is violate their principles.
Yes.
There are people who are starving to death, and the last thing that they would do is violate their values. You see it right now in Gaza. You see it all over the world. In fact, it's not even only Muslims. You see it all over the world. in civilizations and cultures all around the world where your honor, your word, your morality, your nobility, your decency is actually more important than eating.
Mm.
There are people like that. There are whole cultures like that. Uh, but in the West, you get to be like that once you've got all of your needs met. So
Mm.
the morality and the values and the principles is always it's a decoration. This is how their so-called civilization came up. This is what they were raised on. This is how they grew. This is how they evolved, for lack of a better word. And so they never had a proper way of assigning value. And then when they interact with non-Europeans, with non-Westerners, and they see people who have civilization, they see people who have culture, they see people who actually have internalized, deeply internalized and integrated value systems, uh, they have to find some kind of way to uh, either find fault with those people or find some way of establishing their value
Mm.
in
Mm.
a new paradigm that challenges their worldview. Because now you're not in your European bubble, you're not in your Western bubble, where it's might makes right because might gets you the value, the
The need.
resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why might makes right, because it acquires the resources. Uh, but then you see that there are people in the world who don't operate like that. So you have to now that challenges your whole concept. You have to find some other kind of way, and more importantly, you're still the same. This is what I mean about the ethos is one thing and the psyche is the other, because the psyche is the same. It's the same primitive, savage psyche that it has always been.
Mm.
And the ethos that they created has been the result of their interactions with others who don't have that psyche. Just like with a psychopath. I've
Mm.
talked about this before. Just like a psychopath who doesn't have empathy, or anyway has very, very little empathy, and doesn't actually understand human emotions. He doesn't feel them, so he doesn't understand them, but he observes them and then he imitates them.
Mm.
It's just like one of those predatory animal that is able to make the same sort of a sound
Mm.
that the prey makes, so that it can draw the prey to him, so he
Nah.
can eat it.
Mm.
This is like what they do. So they learn that other people in the world value things. They have value. They value morality. They value chastity. They value honesty. They value fairness, and so on and so on and so on. They value peace and harmony and so forth. So they learn the language of that, but their
Mm.
psyche never changed. They learned how to imitate all of that. Okay, so all of this comes down to you have never learned how to properly assign value.
Mm.
And then you have to now create a new system of assigning value that is, as you said, the value system of Iblis, the assignment value system of Iblis, which is immutable qualities, immutable
Yeah.
characteristics.
Yeah.
Your color, your race, so-called race, you invented this concept anyway in the first place
Mm-hmm.
for the same purpose, so that you can create false hierarchies of humanity, a false caste system in humanity that always somehow puts you on top.
Yes. Nah.
The one who invented this system, the one who invented this hierarchy, just coincidentally happens to be the one who's at the top of
Mm.
that hierarchy
Mm. Every time.
every time.
Mm.
Uh, and then it becomes very useful to you to apply this hierarchy to the people whom you want to exploit because the resources that they have.
Yes. Nah.
You want to prey upon the people who have resources that you don't have, because again, as I say, in Europe, uh, it was not particularly, and until now, it's not particularly resource rich.
That's right.
It's a harsh climate, it's a harsh environment. It's not really that livable, to be
Mm.
frank. They found a way to live, good for you, but the way that they found to live is by taking resources from everyone else,
Because they're
by
savages
going
and they
everywhere
don't.
else.
Yeah. They don't know
Say
what to
again?
do. Africans don't know what to do with all those resources. Natives, they don't know what to do with all this land. Got to come in
Right.
and
Also, they
save
don't
you.
deserve them. Right. Also, they don't deserve them because
Mm,
they are lower on the hierarchy of humanity, according to the hierarchy of humanity that we just made. So, for example, with enslaved Africans, well, they're not even really fully human. They're subhuman. So when we talk about equality of between men and all men were created equal, well, obviously that doesn't apply to the slaves because they're not from that category. They're not from the
okay.
fully human category. So this is how they create this way of thinking, and the reason why they create this way of thinking. So yeah, they'll say, "Oh, black people are thugs. Black people are this, that, and the other. They're lazy. Mexicans are lazy, so on." Meanwhile, they're known for doing the hardest labor. Black people are violent and savage and so forth. Meanwhile, they raised your babies back in the day. Uh, the they will always assign uh, negative qualities to whoever they want to exploit rather than owning up to the negative quality they have as an exploiter.
Mm, mm,
Again, all of this has to do with keeping the compartmentalization of who you really are away from who you want people to think you are and the way you want to think about yourself. The psyche, the character versus the ethos, the reality versus the myth. They have to make the only way that they can maintain the myth about themselves is to blame everyone whom they victimized. That they deserve it, that they've earned it, that they're this way because they're this way. Not because we have done them wrong, not because we have oppressed them, not because we have exploited them, not because we enslaved them, not because we brutalized them, not because we oppressed them, not because of colonization. They're just like that.
mm, mm.
But we're not just like anything. There's no equality that can be assigned to us except virtue and wonderfulness. It's transparent. It's transparently ludicrous.
Mhm.
Uh, how anyone can go along with this, I don't understand. I really, except that they never allow you a moment to think. Like I say, even with this Black History Month, you get 28 days, and you better jam pack that 28 days with positivity.
Sorry.
And just like you said, followed by Women's
Mhm.
History Month, Black
Mhm.
History Month. Uh,
There's
I'm sure that
mental.
there's some Muslim organization in America that's looking for Muslim History Month.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, all of this, you also have to understand, reframe it as this is the white power structure in America, basically affirming and admitting we are never going to integrate your history into history,
Mm,
into the teaching of history. We will give you this time to talk about it because it will never be integrated into our story, into the totality of our story, into our telling of actual history. We will even be we will even have apartheid in our telling of history. There's a black history and then there's history. Officially, it's not called white history. There's black history and then there's history. And we're never going to integrate your story into our story. This history is whites only. Black history is black history, segregated history. And the same with women. We're never going to integrate your story into the totality of the story because this story exists to maintain the fake ethos. This story, this history is a myth. And in that myth, you have no role
mm,
because your actual role in reality, in the reality of the history of what we have done, destroys the myth.
mm, mm,
So you
mm.
can't be in there. You can't be in the history that we tell, but we'll give you a month to talk about your history. But that's just a way of saying you're never going to be in the total history that we talk about. So the whole purpose is to maintain this segregation of the American narrative.
Mhm. Mhm. It's really dark. It's really dark when you paint the full picture and you look at it for what it is. That split personality of trying to really break down things in a way where you come out looking the best, while your victims are really the reason for their victimhood is themselves. You know, it's a really twisted thing, and I mean, speaking from my vantage point, I think it gets even worse when that sort of psychological racial Stockholm syndrome kicks in to the point where Muslims feel validated through intersectionality in Western media. Like being where they're at doesn't make us better. That's not winning. That's not what arriving looks like. Or having a famous public figure say the quiet part out loud isn't a dub. Like that's not a win for us. That's just a testament to just how pervasive the problem is. And you know, I've seen Black people feel really empowered by, you know, the Super Bowl and stuff. I'm like, but this generated millions of dollars for whom exactly? And this is a reflective of what power structure exactly. And even, you know, you mentioned like Muslims wanting a Muslim history day in America. It's like you've taken on the master's enterprise. You've it's almost in a lot of ways it's like the worst thing you could do is end up a federal holiday. Like you don't want to end up a federal holiday. It's like an indictment. It's an indictment that you've been cut out from being a part of the whole. And so when I think about Islam and I think about you know, I've seen people say some really strange and very ignorant things about, oh, how can you be Black and be a Muslim? It's like, how can you be Black and be a Christian? You know, like how what kind of critical thinking is that? But let's just put that to the side. You know, when I think about the way the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam really elevated the merit of people regardless of their skin color, and how that is the prophetic practice. That is Quranic decolonization. We don't need to call out Luqman being Black to feel validated as Black people. We don't need to, you know, stop at Bilal and say, look, the Black Sahabi. Like, we don't need to point out Sahih hadith of Musa being brown skinned and Isa being red skinned and Adam in Arabic meaning jet black, or like, we don't need that to feel validated, because the only reason why we would even use that vernacular is because we're adopting the rhetoric of the people who made this a problem in the first place. You know, avoiding the discussion isn't the answer, but parroting it back reinforces the colonized mindset, right? So any parts of future advancement of psychological decolonization, of economic sovereignty, which, and ironically, when Martin Luther King started talking about those things, he started talking about economic sovereignty, then he's dead. You know, we start talking about, you know, accountability. You know, like you have an Article 6 campaign as a means of pushing accountability. When Malcolm X starts talking about bringing charges against the United States, then next thing you know, he ends up dead. Rahimahullah, you know. But when we start talking about that United States accountability with efforts like Article 6 or psychological decolonization, by really sort of taking these things that are features of the West and just calling it what it is. This is barbarity. This is psychopathy. This is a split personality. This is not functional. It's not sustainable. And these features within the ethos and the mindset of the West as a whole is the reason why it was always doomed to fail in the first place. And then pointing that at corporate democratization, which is a part of the systematic infrastructures that reinforce those racial extremes of racism, requires all of us, regardless of where we're at in life, regardless of, you know, the things that we see in the world, we have to, in our own ways, go beyond Black History Month. Just like how people have to go beyond Palestine merch. You know, you have to go beyond just saying, I'm not going to go to Starbucks anymore. We have to go beyond those little boxes that we find ourselves getting put in and saying, hey, it's okay. You can play in this little circle right here. Just stay right here. I don't know if you've seen this, and maybe it's because I don't have any social media. I only am exposed to what is shared with me, but I've seen like some these clips of people at protests just being asked outright, what are you protesting? And they can't string together a full thought to articulate what it is. It's just like a reaction. It's just an emotional reaction. Something wrong is happening. It's like, no, we have to go beyond just saying that there's a need for highlighting so-called minorities, for highlighting women's history in the United States, for highlighting Hispanic heritage, for highlighting the what happened to natives in this country. We have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond these empty gestures and find ways to be the change. And as a Muslim, I'm called to, by God, to be the change, not just do lip service, but to actually move my hands and move my tongue and move my feet to try to advocate for some semblance of change that goes beyond empty gestures. And I feel like conversations like this are certainly a good step in the right direction. So I appreciate your time, Shaykh, and I appreciate you engaging in this discussion with me. Far be it from me to cut you off. If you had any closing thoughts, we would love to hear it.
I mean, I have to say, this is an area where you and I have a difference.
Sure.
With regards to the prospects of change.
Yeah.
In America. I know
where you're going. Yes.
There's only one prospect for change. Only one in America. There is only one prospect for change, and that is Islam. That's the only prospect for change. There is nothing at all, zero, that is contained within the cultural civilizational toolbox of that society that can fix it. There is nothing. Everything that's in their toolbox will only make the situation worse. And every time they go into their toolbox, they do only make the situation worse. There's the only thing that can resolve this problem is Islam, and we're not in disagreement about that.
Sure.
But we're in disagreement about the viability of that happening.
Yeah.
The feasibility of that happening.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, I don't know if we'll include this in the video or not.
Keep
but
it in.
I'll tell you. There's something wrong with this people. There is something wrong with this people. And wallahi, I feel, and again, no one should misunderstand me. Every individual can come to Islam. Every individual heart can be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as a so-called civilization, as a collective, wallahi, there's something very wrong with these people. That's different. You have some American exceptionalism, but it has nothing to do with the exceptionalism in the things that you think you're exceptional in. You are absolutely exceptional in your misguidance and your stubbornness against guidance. You're absolutely exceptional. I don't know of a people like this. And I'm not just talking about Americans. I'm talking about the West generally.
The West, yeah.
The Muslims had control over Spain for centuries. It was the best time in the history of that country.
That's right.
It was the golden age of that country.
That's right.
It made that country beautiful and important and enlightened, and it was a guiding light for the whole continent.
That's right.
And their response to that was to drive the Muslims out.
Snuff
There's
it out.
something wrong with these people.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with these people. Islam spread far into Europe, and you never stop fighting it. Islam, look where Islam is in China.
That's right.
Islam spread to China. Imagine from the Jazirat al-Arab, from the Arabian Peninsula, all the way to China, all the way to Indonesia, all the way to Malaysia, all around the world. But it hit a brick wall when it came to Europe, except for a few areas.
Yeah.
It hit a brick wall when it came to Western Europe. It hit a brick wall. What's wrong with you people? There's something wrong with you, that you are so hostile to guidance. You're so hostile to morality, to discipline, to decency, again, to chastity, to sobriety, to equality, and to judging people according to the Quranic criteria of their actual righteousness.
Yeah.
You are addicted to this fake hierarchy that you created, which allows you or permits you to never be moral, but to still have value based on the color of your skin. That no matter what else you are, at least I'm white, so therefore I have value. It doesn't matter what kind of a villain, what kind of a dastardly, disgusting individual you are, you can still pretend that you have value based on the immutable quality that you were born with. You know, I mean, this is again, this is what when you were talking about Iblis. It's very important to acknowledge or to recognize that not only was he judging his perception of his superiority to Adam alayhi salam based on the nature of their creation, but upon completely shallow, superficial elements that have nothing to do with character.
That's right.
And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He made us into multiple tribes and different types of people and so forth, so that we can know each other.
Ta'rif, yeah. To
Exactly.
understand each other.
To understand each other. Now, someone might say that seems contradictory. They made all of these people different, all of these different languages, all of these different colors, everybody look at it a different kind of way. How are we supposed to know each other? How are we supposed to understand each other when we're all different like that? Because of the thing that is important about who you are. It is none of those things.
That's right.
None of the apparent differences between people are of any relevance whatsoever, because what matters is your character. What matters is your morality. What matters is your values. And that's what we're supposed to look at.
That's right.
But in the West, in Europe, they did not accept that idea. They never wanted that idea applied to themselves, and they hated it so badly that they are among the only people where Islam came to them, was present with them, and they drove it out.
That's right.
That's how much. That's the level of animosity and hatred that they have towards this type of an approach to life. That I feel that there's a kind of a curse on this people, that they were created to be the
Awliya of Shaitan. Yeah.
Nemesis.
He's gonna have allies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's got to be somebody. Right?
You're committed to this.
Yeah.
Even because everywhere else that Islam came, and even if there was fighting involved, when Islam came to some places, yes, there was some fighting involved in this place or that place. Say India, for example, there was fighting in India. The Hindus stayed Hindus, except for those, I mean, alhamdulillah, many converted. But the Hindus stayed Hindus. We let them stay Hindus. We left them alone. We coexisted and so on. They didn't drive us out.
That's right.
They never tried to drive us out. No matter what level of hostility they have, Muslims are still there until now.
They did a few things just so that you know how people with selective hearing in the comment section. Yeah. They did a few things, yes, we know, but you can't compare it to what happened in the West.
Not like the West.
You can't compare the two. Yeah. Objectively. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And in other places, in Africa and in Southeast Asia and so forth, the people were so decent and so good by their own nature that all they had to do was interact with Muslims.
That's right.
That's all they had to do was interact. They just had to experience Muslims through trade with Muslim merchants and so forth. All they had to do was interact with them, and they embraced Islam.
That's right.
Meanwhile, you have had centuries of interaction with Muslims, and your hearts are as hard as a stone.
That's right.
Nothing can enter your heart, except for hatred and vilification of Islam. This is a different kind of people. Well, they're different kind of people. I mean, even you get into Russia, you've got Chechnya, you've got Dagestan, you've got Russia, you've got Muslims there. There's a very large Muslim population in Russia.
Still, yeah.
But the Muslim population in Western Europe is by the mercy of Allah, and only Allah knows why, mercy on these people, through immigration.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the only reason that you've got Muslims in Western Europe, and the only reason you've got Muslims in America is through
Yeah.
immigration and now, alhamdulillah, conversion.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to have, if you people had any sense, if Allah knew of any decency in your home, in your civilization, you would have been Muslim for centuries. At least you would have had Muslim populations there for centuries.
Yeah.
Like everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Yep. You're different. You're a different kind of people. You have,
Shaykh,
you know. No. I'm just saying that they have a commitment to their kufr.
Yeah.
They have an absolute commitment to their kufr. And this makes it extremely difficult to ever get through to them on a collective level, on a societal, so-called civilizational level. On an individual level, of course you can, because everyone is suffering from that. Because everyone is miserable from that. That kufr, it's a miserable state of living. It's a miserable place to be. I mean, just like in America, when we began by talking, I was saying that the issue of race, people can't even talk about it. That's miserable. That's a miserable place to be, because you could be a white person in America and not be a racist. But you probably can't even find a way to talk about race without sounding like a racist.
No, they can't.
You know?
They can't. And people who are colonized with that mindset, they do this. They also mirror the same tendencies, for sure.
Right. And I mean, because there's so many sick things about that. Wallahi, I can go on and on. There's so many sick things about that society, that so-called civilization. They have, wallahi, by their existence, they have dropped the IQ level of the planet. They've skewed the
You're
IQ
not
level.
Wrong. Yes,
in terms of what they have contributed is to they messed with the numbers of humanity's IQ level.
Well, they would.
They do it deliberately. They do it deliberately and calculatedly. That we've talked about this before, also, at least in the chat. And this is one of the reasons for anyone who's watching. This is one of the reasons, actually, one of the reasons why Brother Turaabi and I don't do more videos, because we talk all the time. And then it feels like we've already sorted things out. It feels like we've already dealt with issues. So it seems like redundant to do a video, but we really should do most of our conversations. We should just do videos instead.
Bismillah. I'm at your service.
Then, of course, there's also the time difference, because he's over there in that wonderful country.
Land of the free. Yes, enough.
I mean, the only cause for hope, in my view, I mean, except for Allah's mercy is available to anyone at any time, and the Hidayah is available at any time. The cause for hope is that particular qawm is themselves going extinct. That particular qawm is going extinct.
And they want it. They even want this for themselves. Mutually assured. I said they even want this for themselves, right? Their own mutually assured destruction through their insane practices as a collective. From yeah.
And you won't be missed. You won't be missed, because you have been a huge detriment to the whole of humanity.
Let me we never play the devil's advocate, Shaykh. That's not our thing. But let me just play the contrarian, inshallah. What would you say to a person that feels like, okay, well, you've just got this internalized hatred for white people, the West, America, because of your experiences, but there's a lot of good, there's a lot of good people. The future is brighter, all these evil people die off, but the good will remain, or whatever. Like, how would you even respond to anyone who tries to make the case that this is just coming from its own, your own Islamic superiority complex, or even try to distort that to make it seem like, well, opposite sides of the same coin? Because people, in a very pedantic and almost as an empty form of rebuttal, try to just hit that Uno reverse card and just try to make it seem like, well, no, you. I mean, maybe you even feel like, why would they even bother with a fool? But if you gave them the time, how would you even push back against such a notion?
Well, I wouldn't give them the time. I wouldn't.
Ah,
Because even this in and of itself is exactly like what I'm talking about in terms
that's
of
the
how you have
problem.
driven down the IQ of the planet.
Yep.
Is that you
That's
think
the problem.
that's a valid approach?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, to say, well, you're just saying that because such and such, and I could say the same thing. Yeah, you can say the same thing, and you probably will say the same thing, and that all that does is prove the fact of what I've said, that you're a dishonest people.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can say whatever you want to say if you don't care about honesty, if you don't care about telling the truth. Yeah, sure, you can say whatever you want to say, but that doesn't make it valid. That doesn't make it legitimate. That doesn't make it authentic. That doesn't make it true. Uh, but yeah, you can say whatever you want to say,
Hmm.
which is all you have ever done anyway. This is all that so-called civilization has ever done anyway. They just
Objection.
say whatever they want to say,
Yep.
regardless of what the truth is. And in fact,
Yeah.
it's not regardless of what the truth is, it's specifically to hide
In
what the
spite of
truth
it.
is.
Yep. In spite of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, and not to keep you longer than I already have, but when I first met you, I told you I am at my core an eschatological pragmatist, right? Very much
I love
consumed
that
with
term, by the way. I've always loved that term, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. This is my aslan, like this is who I am at my fundamental core, regardless of my feelings or my preferences or anything. However, I can maximize my akhirah. I feel like it's a very beautiful exchange, and I'm willing to go there. I even tell some of my students in the leadership class, like, look, they'll kill me, they'll put me in prison, but if you're a few shades lighter, then get the message out there. You know what I'm saying? So even just accepting, like, the Malcolm X's of the world tend to get X'd out, but the impact that they leave on history is etched by Allah's will. I do think like this, and I understand that there is a certain risk with trying to give the truth to these people. As someone who lives in the United States, I'll tell you, and I don't mind sharing this because I don't even consider it to be like bragging. I consider it to be like, in spite of myself and in spite of people. Alhamdulillah, since becoming Muslim, maybe somewhere in the ballpark of like 7,000 shahadas or something like that. It's like a drop in the
Allah,
bucket compared
Allah.
to how many people have rejected the number. So if I tell you 7,000 have accepted shahada through our efforts and means, and directly and through presentations or like, yeah, but for every one person, I mean, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 heard the same thing and just said no. So I definitely agree that, I mean, what you're saying is what Allah said. إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. They're not, it doesn't matter. The people who disbelieve, it doesn't matter what you say, it's all the same to them. If you warn them, if you don't warn them, they will never ever believe. ولو علم الله فيهم خيرا لأسمعهم ولو أسمعهم. Like, if Allah knew that there was any good in them, then Allah would have made them hear, but they don't hear, right? And these are people who are mu'ridun. They will continuously turn away. This is just their nature. وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. Most people will never even be able to believe in Allah except that they do shirk with Allah. They can't have a solid image in their mind of belief in God alone without partners. They have to add a trinity. They have to add a son of God. They have to add a blood sacrifice. They have to add a pantheon. They have to add something. They can't even bring themselves to acknowledge the nature of their own creation and their relationship with their creator. So if that's where it falls apart, then relationships with the creation, between the creation, is hopeless. And to that extent, when you describe it this way, I do agree with you. This is a godless society, and it's people who prefer to not have God, and the image of God that they have in their mind is so delusional and so peculiar and so disgusting that it just reinforces the notion that the God that they really want is themselves. It's taghut at its highest level. It's self-worship. ألم أعهدهم إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. Allah tells us in the Quran, O children of Adam, don't worship the devil. He is to you a clear enemy. These are people who have taken Shaitan as their best friend, and that's the culture. That's the culture, from the sports to the music to the movies to the TV shows to the governance to the politics to the workplace to every form of entertainment to the educational infrastructure systems. It's all self-worship and worship of the devil. And with that being said, like, yeah, there is less hope for them, that there would just be some Nineveh event, that everyone just converts. Allahu Alam. But yeah, I do
Well,
agree with you. Yeah. I'm just a little
Sorry
selfish
to
with
interrupt,
you guys. No problem.
but I think the only other scenario that I think could save them, and this is feasible, in my
Sure.
opinion, this is feasible, would be a history repeating itself like the Mecca, where you have a lot of people who just see, well, this is the way the wind is blowing.
Mm-hmm.
We're outnumbered at this point. It doesn't even make sense for
To
us to
push
still
back.
hold on to this anymore, to this shirk
Mm-hmm.
anymore, to this kufr anymore. It doesn't even
Yeah.
make sense because we're surrounded now by Muslims. Everyone has accepted it but us. And
Mm-hmm.
we just look foolish now. Uh, because so they'll convert not for a sincere reason, not out of a sincere belief reason, but who cares? They'll comply, they'll submit to Islam, and maybe the faith will grow in their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because of what's happening now economically, because of what's happening
Yeah.
now politically,
Yeah.
America is going to become more isolated. The situation in America is going to decline,
I
I
mean, it's
think, over
getting
the
bad really fast. Yeah.
yeah, but you still have seen nothing yet, I'm afraid.
True.
Um, that by the year 2100, say,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I could see there being something like a mass conversion, even if it's over the course of, you know, we're, over that, we'll say, I'll put it this way, over the next, what are we, 2025, so over the next 75 years,
Sure.
we will see mass conversions in America. We will see mass conversion in the West in slow motion over the course of generations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, as the Muslim world rises,
Yeah.
uh, as the Muslim world becomes a collective global superpower, and as Americans start to recognize that their so-called civilization has betrayed them terribly and has
Mm-hmm.
thrown them under the bus and has abandoned them, just like the false gods of the Quraysh, just like the false gods of the Mushrikeen, uh, many of the converts to Islam in the days of the Sahaba uh, came to the realization our gods aren't helping us.
That's right.
Even what was it? It wasn't it was Abu Jahl, wasn't it? Who said at Badr, if the God of Muhammad is true, then let them win.
Mm.
And if the God of Muhammad is false, then let us win. So he had
Famous
some kind
last
of doubt
words.
in his mind, and we know what happened.
Famous last words.
But so your false god of your white supremacy, your false god
Mm-hmm.
of your Western supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
your false god of your democracy, freedom, what have you, your so-called Western civilization uh, is failing you, and it has not done nothing but fail you. And the failure of that civilization and its betrayal of its own people is going to
Mm-hmm.
become so obvious and undeniable over the next few decades that you will see people turning, I think, looking for, searching for uh, the truth, searching for something that's real, something that is genuinely moral, and a people whose ethos and whose character and whose history and whose psyche are all in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no one but the Muslims.
Yeah.
And so I think people will be converting, whether it's genuine or not genuine. They will be converting because there will be some people who are converting just because
That's
it just seems like otherwise we're fighting against the glacier.
sure.
There's nothing that can be done about the spread and the rise of Islam.
Yeah.
So we may as well, just like some of the people in Mecca who converted just because that's the way the tide was turning. There will be people like that. Uh, but otherwise, a mass conversion of this qawm, it doesn't seem to be in the cards because even the previous generations of Muslims who were trying to convert these people were better than us,
Yeah, that's true.
and they hit a brick wall.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take something categorically different. I have no qualms about where I'm at or what I'm up against or what I'm dealing with, and even uh, just as in the Quran in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran, the first five verses are allocated with telling you the nature of the believer. The second two verses are to tell you the nature of the disbeliever. Just two verses to tell you about
Right.
just the nature of the disbeliever. There's a seal on their hearts. There's nothing that you can do about it. And they, in a lot of ways, they prefer it this way. They don't want to unearth the truth, and they will live their lives in accordance with that reality. But then 13 verses to describe the nature of a hypocrite. ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين. That there will be from humanity people who say they believe in this stuff, but they're actually not believers. And a part of that is that they think that they're the ones that are fixing things, but no, they're the ones that are corrupting things. They're the ones who even think the idea of belief is just like a joke, and they mock people who believe, but it's really the mockery just falls back on themselves. And so I've even seen, a sort of push towards that with regards to this sort of like everyone get along to go along type of mindset. Everyone protests Islamophobia, Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter. They just blur it all into this one messy ethical gumbo, and it's a testament to the fact that they're espousing values that in their heart they really don't believe in. So I mean, by that estimation, you're spot on. Like I see it constantly, right? It's something that I'm exposed to.
And I'm saying all of that in no way whatsoever as a criticism of you.
Yeah, I know. I got alhamdulillah.
You're
Yeah, I don't feel that way.
what have you. Not
Mm-hmm.
at all. Any Muslim who's
Yeah.
there, who's making da'wah, any Muslim who's anywhere is doing what they're supposed to do. The criticism is exclusively for those people.
Sure. Well, I mean, with that being said, we would close with a happy Black History Month, but we'll be happy when Black History Month is just history. We'll be happy when Black History Month is history. And we ask Allah to really open our hearts to the truth and give us the strength to follow it and to see falsehood as falsehood and to give us the strength to avoid it. And I ask Allah to reward you for giving us this time and to all of the listeners who made it to the end of this recording. We appreciate your time and look forward to next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah soon, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, brother.
Yeah.
It's very good. Thank you so much. Yalla, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.